The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of the ICBA. Welcome to the .bank webinar. Are you ready? Primer for banks interested in the .bank domain name extension. A recording of this webinar and a copy of its slides can be available for download at www.encirca.com/ICBA. Allow me to introduce you to our presenters this afternoon. Our first presenter will be Viveka Ware, ICBA Executive Vice President, responsible for regulatory policy for the ICBA, also a board member of the FTLD Registry. We also have Craig Schwartz, FTLD Registry Managing Director, managing .bank and .insurance domain registries. He is also former Chief Registry Liaison with ICANN. John McElwain, partner of Nelson Mullins, Riley & Scarborough, focuses on intellectual property litigation and strategy. He was voted one of the best lawyers in America from 2013 throughout 2015. He's also Vice Chair of Internet Committee for the International Trademark Association. And finally, we have Thomas Barrett, President of Encirca. Encirca is the first .bank accredited registrar, founded in 2001. It is the sole registrar serving on FTLD's Security Requirements Working Group. They are also a trademark agent for the Trademark Clearinghouse. Allow me to run through the agenda for today's webinar. We'll first start off with an introduction for new GTLDs. We'll move on to bank policies, trademark protection, registration process, and costs. And I'd like to remind you, if you do have any questions, please enter them into the question box in the bottom right-hand side of your GoTo widget. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Viveka Ware on Introduction to New GTLDs.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us to learn more about .bank. The Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, commonly known as ICANN, decided to expand the generic top-level domains, the letters in the Internet domain name, immediately after the dot, from the previous level to hundreds and possibly thousands once the expansion is complete. ICANN is a not-for-profit organization that coordinates how unique Internet addresses are assigned worldwide, and they have quite a bureaucratic process for doing so, but it seems to be working. ICANN requires that all new generic top-level domains offer a sunrise period during which trademark holders may pre-register names that are the same or similar to the trademarks in order to avoid cyber squatting. A bank must have a trademark granted by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office to participate in the sunrise period. This period occurs prior to the general launch of the new generic top-level domain. Registrars must be accredited by ICANN and then approved by the operator of .bank and .insurance, and which is FTLD Registry Services, LLC. The .bank generic top-level domain will launch in just a few weeks next month with a sunrise period. The .insurance generic top-level domain will launch in the fall of 2015. Community banks with insurance agencies will be interested in the .insurance domain. Now let's talk about how .bank is different. First of all, .bank is owned and operated by the financial services community, which includes a coalition of banks, insurance companies, and financial services trade associations from around the world. Only verified members of the global banking community are eligible to register domains. For banks, that includes charter verification with the registrant's regulator. Domains must correspond to legal names. For an example, ABC Bank would not be able to register XYZ.bank. .bank is a trusted, verified, and more secure and easily identifiable space on the Internet for the conduct of global banking transactions. Now, what are the benefits of .bank? .bank is designed to be a trusted, protected, and more secure online location for banking services. Each applicant will be verified as legitimate members of the banking industry before being permitted to register for .bank. .bank establishes a solid foundation on which a bank can securely communicate with customers, stakeholders, and regulators. The security bar is much higher for financial institutions than other companies conducting business over the Internet, given your roles as trusted financial intermediaries for your customers. .bank is poised to be the recognized online platform for growth and innovation in the banking sector. ICBA's role in .bank. ICBA applauds the formation of FTLD Registry, the registry operator for .bank and .insurance, and is pleased to serve as a founder, investor, and endorser of FTLD Registry. We believe it is critical to protect and serve the financial services community by creating a secure financial services channel on the Internet. Additionally, we believe it is in the best interest of the financial services industry to own, operate, and govern its own top-level domains. We are very pleased to be working with NCIRCA to help community banks understand and register for the soon-to-be-launched .bank top-level domain. As part of our agreement with NCIRCA, community banks will be able to access a unique website with information and resources about securing and activating .bank. NCIRCA and ICBA will host frequent webinars allowing community banks to learn about eligibility for .bank, the registration process for .bank, and then implementation tips for .bank. Additionally, ICBA members will be able to take advantage of preferred pricing for .bank registration.
Thank you, Viveka. At this moment, I'd like to turn it over to Craig Schwartz on .bank policies.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Viveka, as well as all the ICBA members that have joined today's webinar. We're really happy to be able to speak with you directly about what we're doing with .bank and to provide some helpful information in addition to that which Tom and John will share shortly to help you understand how to navigate the process and to take advantage of this new Internet domain targeted specifically for the banking sector. So Viveka's already talked a little bit about who FTLD Registry is and what their role has been in both its formation and its ongoing governance. This About slide gives a little more information about when we were founded and that we've got an ongoing security requirements working group that actively looks at the controls that are in place for .bank and .insurance. They did their first pass at developing requirements back in 2011. They recently revisited those in the latter part of 2014, and that group will meet annually or more regularly if necessary to continue to ensure that the security requirements we have in place for .bank and .insurance are the latest and the most applicable. We've also got an advisory council that's been very active in the development of our policies and procedures, and we continue to engage them as necessary and appropriate as we advance our domains. And just noting at the bottom that VeriSign is one of our key partners. They provide our technical infrastructure, and they are also the registry operator for .com and .net. Symantec is our verification agent and would be the one that would be communicating with banks directly should additional information be required to facilitate the verification. And then we also are working working with a select group of registrars, and Encirca is obviously one of those. So moving on to the next slide. So one of the elements of .bank and .insurance, we'll mostly speak about .bank today, are the strict eligibility requirements, and that guides both who can get into the domain, what kind of domains can they have, and how can those domains be used. As you can see here, we've got a number of different categories of those that would be eligible, ranging from banks themselves to their trade associations, such as the ICBA. Potentially, there are government regulators here in the United States, whether it's the FDIC or the Fed or the OCC. We also have included industry service providers, and what we're speaking about here is what we've come to know as core service processors. So those entities that play a key role in how you service your customers, be it your online banking service, be it your consumer-facing web presence, or a variety of other ways that service providers help you reach your customers and conduct business every day. And so a question that we regularly get is, my core processor registers domain names for us. Can this continue to happen in the .bank space? And the response to that is yes, they can, provided the contact information they provide for the registration is that for the bank and not for themselves. And we'll get into that a little bit later during the verification process. Can we go to the next slide, please? So bank has enhanced security requirements. It's what makes us different than every other existing top-level domain registry that's out there, and as well as nearly every one of the new ones that are being launched almost every day now. We've talked a little bit about mandatory verification already, and Tom will speak in greater detail, but the core of that is ensuring that when an individual registers a domain name or applies to register a domain name, that they are a full-time employee of the bank, that they are authorized by the bank to make domain name registration requests on their behalf, and also that the domain names that they've applied for comply with our name selection policy. And we'll get to that on the next slide. But for the moment, when we talk about enhanced security, we've got a few examples here. DNSSEC is intended to ensure that when visitors or customers are seeking out your .bank domain name and your website, that they're getting to where they intended to be, rather than possibly being redirected to a malicious or fictitious site. Email authentication is a way of setting a policy for your company and essentially for your domain that effectively advertises to email service providers such as Google and Yahoo and Microsoft. And what it advertises are your rules around how your email should be treated. And what I mean by that is you may set a policy for your domain name that says we do not send email originating from this domain. And the way the email service provider would treat an email purporting to be from an email address associated with your account, is that the domain email would not be delivered to the recipient. Another element of the authentication piece is advertising that we only send email from specific IP addresses, and if email purporting to be from our web domain address but not associated with one of the identified IP addresses is sent, then again, the email service provider should not deliver those emails. So that's why we say email authentication to mitigate spoofing, phishing, and other malicious activities. Enhanced encryption protects the way you communicate with your customers, with your regulators, with other banking organizations, and in general how you communicate over the internet. It is intended to ensure the security of that communication and to prevent activities such as eavesdropping and data tampering. Multi-factor authentication is something your registrar will implement. If you choose Encirca, it would be a responsibility of Encirca to ensure that only authorized users of your accounts may make changes to your registration data. And with a multi-factor authentication process, there are two components that are necessary. They are what you know, which is your username and your password. And the second component is what we call what you have, and it could be an SMS code that is sent to your smartphone. It could be a similar type code that is emailed to you, but it's a requirement that you have that additional piece of information to access your account and to change registration data. Prohibition of proxy and privacy services is intended to prohibit a registrant or a domain name holder from providing contact information in their registration that is not of the bank itself. So you can't hide behind a false set of identification in .bank and .insurance, and we know that that frequently happens in other domains, which is why it makes law enforcement so difficult to track down bad actors on the internet. And then finally, the requirement to use .bank name servers. I think Tom is maybe going to go into this a bit more. Typically now, you probably have a name server that looks like ns1.mybank.com, and in .bank, all of your name servers have to be hosted on a .bank name server. Again, this is another layer of the enhanced security that is a requirement in .bank. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So the naming selection is also another one of our policies, and we created this to ensure that domain names are only getting into the hands of entities that are entitled to have them. Depending on the registration period that you come into .bank during will dictate the kind of domain names that you can register. In general, we say that domain names must correspond to a trademark, trade name, or service mark of the business, and that's certainly the rule during the general availability period starting on June 24th. We also say that domain names may not be on FTLD's list of reserve names, and some of those examples are cited in the last bullet on the page, such as citizens, community, and national. What it means is you couldn't register citizens.bank, but what you can do during general availability is be a bit more creative. And if you are, for example, Citizens Bank of Mississippi, you might want Citizens Bank MS.bank or Citizens MS.bank or maybe even CBMS.bank. And we're not going to get to it yet, it's on the next slide, but there are examples there of how you might structure your name around the reserve names list, or in general your bank web domain. Domain names are limited to alphanumeric characters, and as noted on the slide, letter domains are currently prohibited. We are looking at a process whereby to seek permission from ICANN where we can make those domains available, but it's not something that's coming on the horizon. I'll also add, and I think that John will touch upon it when we get to the Trademark Clearinghouse and Sunrise registration process, and that is during the Sunrise period, which starts on May 18th and runs through June 17th. It's during that period where the domain names that are registered must be an exact match of the domain name, or excuse me, of the name you have registered in ICANN's Trademark Clearinghouse. And John will give details of that during his presentation. So we can go on to the next slide. So here are some examples of the corresponding rule, which I've spoken to already. Again, it's intended to show you how you might structure your domain names, and that there's a lot of leeway in how you do that during the general availability period. Let's move on to the next slide, please. And I guess I turn the mic back over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Craig. At this moment, I'd like to remind you, if you do have any questions throughout this webinar, we will get to all of them at the end of the presentation. Please enter them into the question box in the bottom right-hand corner of your GoToWebinar widget. At this moment, we'd like to go to John McElwain for trademark protection. John?
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Craig. And a big thank you to ICBA and to Encirca for organizing this webinar. I'm going to be talking about trademark protection, which is important in the domain name system for 3 reasons. First, it allows for the recording of a trademark into the Trademark Clearinghouse. Second, it's going to impact Sunrise, your ability to obtain a Sunrise registration, and to a certain extent the verification process of your .bank application. And third, it allows a bank to protect its mark from having others utilizing it online or in a domain name. But what I'm going to be covering here today is the intersection of trademarks with the .bank process, which primarily impacts the timing of a bank's ability to register a domain name. So with respect to the slide that's currently up, let me hit a few of the points in terminology here. The letters TMCH stand for the Trademark Clearinghouse. The Trademark Clearinghouse is an entity created by ICANN to serve as a repository of trademark registration data. That's different from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which is the governmental entity that issues trademark registrations. Sunrise period that you see on there. Sunrise period is an early registration period open only to holders of trademark registrations that are recorded with the Trademark Clearinghouse. Then we have the general availability period. The general availability period is also called the land rush period. This is a period in which any person meeting the eligibility requirements for .bank can register a domain name there. So with respect to the timing here, the Sunrise period is going to start at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on May 17th. General availability, as you see, open to all banks without the requirement of a trademark in the Trademark Clearinghouse, is going to start at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on June 23rd. You'll hear about this a little bit more, but keep in mind that on both the Sunrise and the general availability, it's still a first-come, first-serve allocation, so there's no guarantee that you'll be able to obtain a .bank domain name, even if you have a Sunrise, you're eligible for the Sunrise registration period. So let's go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so Sunrise, the period, again, the early registration period that's available to banks that have a trademark registered or recorded within the Trademark Clearinghouse. It's going to be restricted in that regard, and the owner is going to have a SMD or signed mark data file. As a result of the current time frame that it is taking to obtain an SMD file from the Trademark Clearinghouse, if a bank has not yet registered or recorded their trademark with the Trademark Clearinghouse, we recommend that you do so as soon as possible. After May 10th, it may be you may not receive your SMD file back in time to be in line early for the Sunrise period. Again, remember that Sunrise is on a first-come, first-served basis, that the verification process with .bank still must be passed, so it's not a guarantee that you'll get the domain name registration. And then, as we heard Craig go into detail, the corresponding rules, such as the ability to span the dot, does not apply. It's very, very important to keep in mind that pursuant to ICANN rules. This is not pursuant to .bank rules. The domain name that you're registering in the Sunrise period must be an exact match to the trademark that you have recorded in the Trademark Clearinghouse. Move to the next one. So to summarize, when to register during the Sunrise period, again, you must have a federal trademark registration that is an exact match of the .bank domain name that you want. If you're unsure as to whether you have a federal trademark registration, you can check that out by going to the USPTO's website, which is at www.uspto.gov. You can click on the Trademarks tab and then on the Trademark Search tab and type in a search for your bank's name as the owner or the particular mark that you are looking for. When to register in general availability, this of course would be when you don't have a federal trademark registration, or if you want a .bank domain name that is not an exact match of your trademark. So again, as we heard Craig go over, this is really the application of the corresponding rule. If you want to span the dot and have not have bank in the first part of the domain name, if you want to use an acronym, a geographic indicator, etc., all of those different non-exact matches would be what you would need to register in the general availability period. I'll turn it back over to Andrew.
Thank you, John. I'd like to remind everyone that a copy of this slide, the whole PowerPoint presentation, can be found online at www.encirca.com/ICBA. At this moment, I'd like to turn over to Tom Barrett to talk about the registration process and the costs.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to the ICBA for letting us host this webinar for the members of the ICBA. I'm going to give you an idea of how the domain name registration process works, and then give you an idea of how you can maximize the success during this process. So next slide, please, Andrew. So if you're familiar with how you register a domain name today, such as at GoDaddy or Network Solutions, you will type in a name you're looking for, and in real time, the registrar will check to see if that name is available for registration. If it is, then you put in your credit card, and that name is then reserved on your behalf. .bank is going to work similar to that, but with some differences. You will, in real time, after the registry is open for business, will check a name for availability. Registrars like ICBA will tell you if it's available or not, if it's taken by someone else or reserved by the registry. And we will reserve it for you so that no one else can grab that name while you go through the verification process. We then instantly send your credentials to Symantec, the validation provider, and they will commence the verification process, which is expected to take about 2 days. Assuming Symantec accepts your application, then they will release your name from the reserve status, and it's free for the bank to start using it. It's important to note that you are not required to start using the name right away. And in fact, you can continue to use your existing website in parallel and go through the necessary steps to bring your .bank online as your business permits. In fact, the registry does plan to publish a migration guide, and we'll be working with the ICBA as well to help their members through this migration process so they can come online with their new bank website. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the verification process for .bank. As I said earlier, the first step is to reserve that name so that no one else can take it while you're going through the verification process. And this is where the registration process is different from registering a .com domain name. Every registrar that is working with the .bank registry will collect from you all of the information that is required for you to complete the verification process. And we will send that information to Symantec, where they will do their security check. They will check that the entity applying for the name is in fact eligible for .bank. And they do this using consulting third-party sources. They will look at the domain names that are being applied for and verify that those correspond to the bank's existing legal rights. They'll verify the address that's been provided, the phone number, and they'll do an additional check in terms of the person who actually submitted that application on behalf of the bank and is listed as a contact. They must be a full-time employee of the bank, and they must be able to be verified by someone else at the bank as not only working there but authorized to act on behalf of the bank. So, for example, we will be collecting your HR department's contact information if you have one, or whoever is responsible within the bank for HR, so they can verify that the person who applied to the name is an actual full-time employee. This process is expected to take about 2 days, and the registry will repeat the process every 2 years. So next slide, please. Once you've been approved for .bank and you've completed that process, the activation process can then proceed. And so as I mentioned earlier, you can continue to use your existing website and activate your .bank domain name. You can certainly forward your .bank domain name to your existing website, and as you over time migrate to .bank, you can forward your existing website or domain name over to your new .bank website. As Craig said earlier, your .bank domain names must use .bank name servers, and the method that we are recommending for banks is that they use their new .bank domain name that they've registered and create name servers based on that. So, for example, as an ICANN registrar, Encirca already provides name server services for a lot of its customers, and so we have our own name servers that we provide on behalf of our customers. Under .bank's policies, registrars will not be able to do that. And so the best solution instead is to use your own domain name and have a service provider host your name servers based on that domain name. So if your name is redvillesavings.bank, your name servers would be ns1.redvillesavings.bank. Next slide. So there are probably 12 to 15 registrars that you can use for .bank. I mentioned earlier, 2 of them, GoDaddy and Network Solutions, are not actually supporting .bank. And so you'll have, if you are comfortable with those, they're currently not accredited for the .bank registry. Encirca certainly would love to have your business. We feel like we have the best pricing in the industry as well as the best service that you'll find anywhere. So as part of our registration service, we are offering a free consultation. So for example, if you're not sure whether or not you have a federal trademark, we will check the USPTO for you and let you know. If you want to know if you might have competition from other trademark owners, not just in the U.S., but anywhere in the world, we can tell you if there's an existing trademark already in the trademark clearinghouse that might be applying for that during the sunrise period. We are very busy now pre-screening applications from banks who want to make sure that the names they're applying for are eligible for their current business. And we also, once those applications are pre-screened, we insert those into a submission queue so that at 8 p.m. we will automatically submit those applications on your behalf. We are also offering some optional services. You're certainly free to apply for multiple domain names in .bank. In fact, many clients are doing that. But you may also decide that you want a fallback name in the event that your first choice name is not available. So we call that the fallback service. We also have a premium DNS service because we recognize that your current web hosting company may not be equipped to provide the security measures required for .bank, such as DNSSEC, DMARC for email, and so we can also provide that service on your behalf as well. Next slide, please. And the next one, please. So what is our pricing for .bank? Our retail pricing is $999 per year. And this is competitive with all of the other registrars that are accredited for .bank. It is an annual fee per domain name and includes both the verification process and the registration fee. In addition, ICBA members are receiving a 10% discount off of this fee, and you can see the discount coupon on the screen. And so if you come to our site today, you can choose to pay immediately by credit card and start the pre-screening process, or you can decide to pay later. Go ahead and start the pre-screening process now and pay later by bank wire or check or what have you. The key part is we will process your applications now without payment, but payment must be received before the submission date for .bank. If for any reason your application is not successful, is rejected by Symantec, or some other bank beats us to it in terms of registering that name, you do receive a refund minus a processing fee. The important point we want to make is that .bank is a global top-level domain, and so banks all over the world will be applying through about 15 different registrars. And even if you have the .com domain name for your bank, that does not give you any special priority on getting the corresponding .bank domain name. Remember, there are country codes, .us, .uk, etc. And so there may be a possibility, especially if you have a fairly common name, that a bank somewhere else in the U.S. or in the world might beat us to it. So there will be a refund, but this is why it's important to make sure you get your application in early so we can submit it for you on your behalf. Next slide. I mentioned earlier some of our optional services. You are allowed to apply for multiple domain names, but if you only want one and you think it's going to be competitive with other banks, we do have a fallback service where we will apply for an alternative name on your behalf only if your first choice is not successful. I also mentioned our premium DNS service, which allows you to have vanity DNS name servers using your .bank domain name, and it supports all of the security requirements such as DNSSEC and DMARC. It also allows you to instantly activate that .bank name and forward it to your existing website if you're not ready to design a standalone .bank website. It's important to note that this is different from your .com website and does not, it's more complementary as opposed to in conflict with your existing website. So let's talk about what you can do to maximize your success on the next slide. First of all, you do need to determine what your desired names are going to be. And again, there are a lot of options with the corresponding rules. So you can use your legal name, you can use your acronym, your abbreviation, you can append a prefix or suffix to your name. You even can use your advertising slogans. You need to determine if you will have competition. And as I mentioned, as part of our pre-screening process, we will let you know if there's already a trademark in the Trademark Clearinghouse that might be matching your name. which means they could be applying during the sunrise period. We'll also let you know if you apply for a name that another customer of ours has also applied for, so you'll have a chance to consider alternatives or go to another registrar. And most importantly, we'll make sure that you have a spot reserved in our auto submission queue so that at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we can submit those names on your behalf. So that's our webinar for today. We would welcome any questions you have if you want to enter them into the GoToWebinar box. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tom. We do have quite a few questions. The first would be regarding bank's website hosting. How will a .bank domain name affect the website hosting? Does anything need to be installed on the host server for .bank to work?
So there are some extra security requirements required for .bank in terms of server-to-server communications. It's probable that most of you are already using DNSSEC with a .com website. You do need different DNS name servers for your .bank domain name. And there's additional encryption required as well. I know, Craig, we were just talking about this yesterday, if you want to say more to that.
Right. So as Tom noted, there is additional work that needs to be done. It could be done by your registrar, such as the additional services that Encirca is providing. It could be done by your hosting company. It could be done by the IT department within your bank. So it really depends on where you get that expertise, but there are additional accommodations that need to be made in order for you to be in compliance with the use requirements for .bank. Tom mentioned DNSSEC, he mentioned enhanced encryption, he talked about the name server requirements. Those are the bulk of them, and they can be fairly easily managed with I think, the right expertise.
Thank you, Tom and Craig. As a follow-up to that question, what steps should a bank's hosting provider be taking to help facilitate the bank from transitioning from a .com to a .bank? Should the bank be discussing this with their hosting provider?
So, Craig, I know you're working on a migration guide. Maybe you want to address that.
Sure. So we anticipate in mid-May coming out with what's called the .bank implementation guide, and it will be effectively a how-to manual with a couple of different components. The first being how to communicate to internal and external stakeholders about your plans to use .bank. We'll also have a business overview element that details the enhanced security requirements and why they are what they are and what they're intended to do, and add in the way of benefits to banks. And then lastly, there'll be a technical guide which will highlight, again, all of the security requirements, explain what they are, and more importantly, provide best practices for implementing those requirements. They will be very heavy technical in nature, as you would expect from a technical portion of the guide. With regard to your hosting provider, it really depends on the type of service that they provide to you now. It could be that they're running your DNS for your bank, or it could just be that they're simply hosting your domain name. So what you need to figure out is, what are they currently doing for you, and what might need to change as you move to a .bank domain. And one of those is clearly the name server requirement. So if you're with hosting company A and your name servers are currently ns1.hostingcompanyaa.com, that is not going to work for mybank.bank. And your hosting company should be able to make that accommodation for you. If not, you may need to talk to your registrar for some additional assistance.
Okay, thank you. Craig, can you please repeat when this technical transition guide will be published?
We are currently projecting it to be available on May 18th.
And they'll be able to find it on your website?
That is the plan, yes.
Great, thank you.
And
Go on.
If I could also add, and I think Tom may have said this, but there's no immediate use requirement of your .bank domain, right? It's A, you want to get in early to ensure the best chance of getting the domain names you'd like to have, and then B, it's going to take some time to activate it or turn on the name. And there's no requirement that you do it immediately. There's actually no requirement that you ever do it. Obviously, we certainly hope that you do, and we would hope that customers would be looking for your name with a .bank at some point in the future. But you want to make sure that you have the best chance of securing the domain names and then have all of the internal conversations that you need to have, whether it's with your marketing department or your IT department, it could be your legal office, and all that is necessary to ensure that you have developed a strategy for deploying .bank in a helpful and meaningful way for your institution and for your customers.
Excellent, thank you. Regarding the Trademark Clearinghouse, if a company has a federally registered trademark but chooses to wait until general availability, is having the trademark alone guarantee that their name will be available after sunrise period?
This is John. I can handle that, and Craig or Tom might want to chime in, but the answer to that is pretty clearly no, unless the trademark is so unique that no other bank could have a claim or does have a claim to that that name.
Yeah, this is Tom from Encirca. I would agree with that. The important thing to remember is there are trademark registrations in every country in the world, and so that's 200 plus jurisdictions where someone else could have a trademark on a particular name and apply for it to the Trademark Clearinghouse. The second point is that if no one does apply for that trademark during the sunrise period, then you could be, now you're competing with banks that perhaps use that name but don't have a trademark registration on it. So the mere fact that you actually do have a federal trademark does not provide you any protection or guarantee that you would get that name during a general availability. Because of the corresponding rules for .bank, there is fairly wide latitude about similar names that a bank can apply for. And so another bank can certainly apply for a variant that turns out to be an exact match of your trademark and get the name before you.
Great, thank you. And how would a bank go about submitting their federally registered trademark to the Trademark Clearinghouse?
So this is Tom again. I can handle that. You have two choices. You can do it yourself as a trademark owner, or you can go through a trademark agent. The website for the Trademark Clearinghouse is trademark-clearinghouse.com. And so there you can find instructions if you decide to do it yourself. Encirca is also a trademark agent, one of the authorized trademark agents for the Clearinghouse, so we would be happy to handle that process for you. Our fee is $249 a year for us to process your trademark to the Trademark Clearinghouse.
Great, thank you. And for those banks that have filed for a trademark, however, have yet to receive their trademark, are they still eligible for the sunrise period?
This is John. I'll take that, and the answer to that is no. You have to have a trademark registration certificate in order to record that with the Trademark Clearinghouse.
Yeah, and in fact, we just had a similar, this is Tom again, because we just went through a similar sunrise period where a client was in the exact same situation. Their trademark had been applied for, was pending, and so the sunrise period actually is a 30-day period. It runs from March 17th to June 17th, and it is first come, first serve. And so if you have other trademarks competing with you, you want to get it in there first. But if you don't have any other trademarks competing with you, then you actually could apply the last day of sunrise period. And so we had a client who, at the beginning of the sunrise, still had a pending mark. It became registered within the sunrise period, and we were able to register for them during the sunrise period. So it really depends on when you applied and how far away you might be from getting that registered. In the U.S., the PTO, I think, John, is we're taking about eight months currently. So that might give you an idea.
Yeah, at the quickest. And I would also mention to that that if a person is in that circumstance, to talk to their trademark clearinghouse agent. I know that Encirca has got the skills to do it. You can oftentimes get the trademark registration certificate and information literally weeks before it shows up in your mailbox. So that would be an important thing to add.
Right.
And in fact, what we could do, the Trademark Clearinghouse has allowed us to do a filing with them pending the registration of a mark. So they have all the information. They're just waiting for notice from the Patent and Trademark Office that it's been registered, and then they flip the switch and release the SMD file for Sunrise.
Thank you. I believe Craig Schwartz had something to add to this as well.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to point out that we're spending a lot of time talking about trademarks and the Trademark Clearinghouse, and yes, that's really helpful and valuable for banks that have nationally registered marks. But my experience talking to literally hundreds of banks over the last couple of months, particularly in the United States, is that the vast majority of banks have never had a need to nationally register their mark with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So the sunrise period wouldn't be applicable to them. There is no need to get involved in the Trademark Clearinghouse process. And as John noted, if you don't currently have a nationally registered mark today, that it's too late to start the process in order to get one to participate in the Sunrise program or the Sunrise period. So for the vast majority of banks, they will come in to .bank during general availability starting on June 23rd at 8 p.m. on the East Coast. I do think it's important to engage with a registrar soon, and particularly seek out those that can be helpful in understanding the process, and even those that offer pre-screening processes such as Encirca, because getting pre-screened and getting into a queue will help you be the most successfully positioned to get the domains you'd like to have when your registration period is open. So I just wanted to remind folks that you only need a registered trademark if you're coming in during the Sunrise process. And again, for the vast majority of banks in the United States, particularly community banks, that's just not a subject or a topic that applies. To come in during general availability, you need to be able to demonstrate a right, and that your mark or the domain you are seeking corresponds to a trade name, a trademark, or a service mark. And an example of a right that you could demonstrate is a common law right to a mark based upon your use of it over time. So I get questions all the time, do I need to have a registered trademark in order to get a .bank domain name? And the answer is no during the general availability period, and yes during the Sunrise period.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Craig. Regarding the USPTO search for registered trademarks, what happens if a bank sees that their trademark is labeled dead? Does that mean it's available for registration by a competitor bank?
This is John. So if it's dead, it means that the mark was registered at one point, and that registration has lapsed for failure to renew it. It does not necessarily mean that it is available for a competitor to pick up. So in that case, I would talk to your trademark counsel to see about what new filings could be done or whether there is any concerns. But in general, just having a dead or a mark that has lapsed in its registration would not allow somebody to compete with you otherwise.
Great, thank you. Now moving on to .bank domain registrations. Is there a limit to the number of relevant domains an institution may register?
Hi, this is Tom from Circa. There is no limit to the number of names that you apply for. You just need to make sure that you can prove you have rights to those names and that they correspond in some way to names that you're already using.
Thank you. And now, has there been any regulatory guidance relating to the .bank registration?
So I'll take this one. This is Craig Schwartz. So we have, over the last several years, been in regular communication with regulators about what we're doing with .bank, and as of yet, I haven't seen any guidance from any regulator here in the United States that would, for example, mandate the use of a .bank domain. I think that regulators are closely watching what happens, and I think there's been some encouragement to explore it, but there's not been any regulatory guidance that I'm aware of, and I think Vico is probably an even better position than myself to perhaps respond to that.
You are correct, Craig. There has not been any regulatory guidance issued today.
Great, thank you. Is there extra concern regarding DOS and DDoS attacks on .bank domains?
So I'll take that one, Tom. Is there concern? There's concern for every domain name now, and the extra security requirements are largely intended to mitigate bad activities that happen on the internet, but nothing ever will completely stop attacks. And so is there concern? Yes. Is there more concern than there is right now in the .com space? I'd say it's about the same level.
Thank you, Craig. And one final question. I believe this is for Tom. Can you please go over the refund policy for pre-screening and the fallback service that Encirca offers?
Certainly. So the pre-screening process is done at no obligation. If we decide that none of your names are eligible and you do not want to proceed with .bank, you will get a full refund. The refund issue comes into play once we submit your application to the registry, and the name is reserved against anyone else registering that name, and Symantec basically conducts their validation process. And so if they reject the bank as not being eligible, for example, the information provided simply did not match what they found for the bank, or if they reject the names that the bank's applying for as not corresponding to names that the bank currently has in use, then there is a non-refundable fee that they will hold back, and correspondingly we will hold back from the applicant as well. There's also another scenario where if the application is passed, I take that back. The other scenario is if we are unable to register your name and not even reach the validation phase because some other bank using another registrar was more successful than us, then you get a refund for your application minus the fee.
Great, thank you. So this is the last question for the webinar. For banks that do not have a federally registered trademark, they are required to provide proof that they have rights to the name. What qualifies as proof?
Want to take that, Greg?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question? What qualifies as proof?
Yes, how would a bank without a federally registered trademark prove that they have rights to the name they're requesting?
So it could be that the bank has a state registered trademark, and while that wouldn't qualify for inclusion in the trademark clearinghouse, it certainly would be evidence or proof of the right to that domain. It could be the submission of information from its current website and its current domain, where it's been using a particular domain name for the period of time that the bank's been in existence. So it could be a trademark registration at the state level. It could be something even at the local or regional level. It could be URL information from their current domain name. It could even be promotional materials if, for example, the bank is looking to register its slogan or its motto, where the slogan or the motto are prominently displayed on the bank's current website.
Thank you very much, Craig. That concludes our webinar for today. If you have any more questions or you'd like to schedule a free consultation, please feel free to email icba@encirca.com. If you have any more questions regarding trademarks, please contact your trademark counsel or John McWayne at john.mcwayne@nelsonmullins.com. I'd like to thank members of the ICBA. I'd like to thank Viveka, Tom, John, and Craig for joining us today. I hope everyone has a great day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.